May 22nd, 2011, just an ordinary spring day. You wake up in the morning, have your breakfast, and sip your coffee by the window, completely unaware that later in the day, you will face one of the most devastating tornadoes in history. This is the day when one of the deadliest and most destructive tornadoes in U.S. history began. The date, May 22nd, 2011, a day when, in just a matter of minutes, thousands of lives were shattered. Let's begin. It was an ordinary spring day in Joplin, Missouri. The temperature was 22.8 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. The air was humid and the sky was partly cloudy. But for meteorologists, it was far from an ordinary spring day. The atmosphere seemed tense, as if it could explode at any moment. In the morning, the National Weather Service, NWS, and local meteorologists issued warnings about severe weather conditions for Missouri and the surrounding areas. The weather patterns that day signaled the possibility of strong tornadoes. Recognizing the danger, the NWS and meteorologists issued their first warning at 1:30 p.m. Filled with fear and concern, meteorologists announced a widespread tornado watch, indicating this wasn't a typical storm, but rather a highly dangerous and potentially explosive storm system. By 5:17 p.m., just 17 minutes before the tornado would touch the ground, a tornado warning was issued, and exactly 17 minutes later, the first tornado made contact with the ground. This marked the beginning of a catastrophe that would change lives in Joplin forever. At exactly 5:34 p.m., just 800 meters from the Missouri-Kansas border, a tornado made its first contact with the ground in Newton County. At first, it was classified as an EF1, with wind speeds of only 160 kilometers per hour, 100 miles per hour. It didn't seem too threatening or alarming, but in just a few minutes, it grew at an extraordinary rate, rapidly intensifying as it moved east-northeast. Just 4 minutes later, at 5:38 p.m., the tornado slammed into Joplin's western neighborhoods. As it tore through Missouri Avenue, 26th Street, and 32nd Street, it had already strengthened to EF2. The wind speed had surpassed 200 kilometers per hour, 125 miles per hour, ripping roofs off houses and sending debris flying everywhere. The tornado was moving so fast that people didn't even have time to realize what was happening before it was already upon them. They rushed for shelter, desperately trying to escape as chaos unfolded around them. At 5:41 p.m., the tornado entered downtown Joplin, and now it had reached its maximum power. EF5. This was when the real destruction began. It was time to either curse the storm or pray for survival. At exactly 5:41 p.m., wind speeds had exceeded 322 kilometers per hour, 200 miles per hour. Since the tornado had formed, it had reached its widest point, 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile across. The area it covered was unbelievable. Because the tornado struck Joplin directly through its center, 70% of the buildings in the city were destroyed within just a few minutes. This was an astonishing number. The most devastated areas were St. John's Regional Medical Center. The hospital was directly in the path of the tornado and was completely destroyed. Beds were thrown, windows shattered, and the building suffered massive damage. Joplin High School, almost completely wiped out. Shopping centers, homes, and businesses turned into rubble in seconds. Public buildings were also heavily damaged, but the tornado wasn't slowing down. No one expected such massive destruction in such a short amount of time, which meant everyone was caught off guard. The situation was dire. As the tornado moved towards the southern and eastern parts of the city, more homes were being destroyed, meaning thousands of people would be left homeless. Under the rubble of the collapsed houses, hundreds of people were trapped and injured. Since the tornado was still raging, authorities struggled to send help. In reality, no one could have sent aid in such a short amount of time. Authorities began making statements. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon immediately declared a state of emergency and stated, "The level of destruction is beyond anything we've ever seen. We are mobilizing all available resources to help the people of Joplin." At 5:45 p.m., the Joplin Fire Department issued a desperate call for help. "We need all available personnel. There are mass casualties, destroyed homes, and people trapped under debris. This is a catastrophe." The city of Joplin, Missouri had just witnessed one of the deadliest tornadoes in U.S. history, and the nightmare was far from over. At 5:50 p.m., the tornado reached the town of Duquesne, just east of Joplin. Here it weakened slightly to an EF4, but it was still far from over. The destruction continued, and wind speeds were still around 280 kilometers per hour, 174 miles per hour. By 6 p.m., the tornado moved into the rural areas of Jasper County, leaving devastation in its wake once again. The wind speed dropped to 240 kilometers per hour, 149 miles per hour, and its width shrank to 800 meters. But even with this slight weakening, farms and small towns in the area suffered heavy damage. Buildings were torn apart, trees were uprooted, and debris was scattered for kilometers. The tornado had only been on the ground for 26 minutes, yet it felt as if it was saying, "I've been here for a long time." In such a short period, it had already caused unimaginable destruction. At 6:10 p.m., in its 36th minute, the tornado began to lose strength near Diamond, Missouri. This brought a small sense of relief to those in the area. As it approached Diamond, the tornado weakened to an EF2. This was a sign that it was slowly beginning to fade away. The wind speed dropped to 200 kilometers per hour, 124 miles per hour, and its width shrunk to 400 meters. Now losing its power, the tornado continued drifting eastward, signaling that the nightmare was finally coming to an end. At 6:28 p.m., the tornado completely dissipated in Newton County, bringing an end to the 54-minute-long nightmare that had left a 38-kilometer, 24-mile path of destruction. What remained was nothing but pain, sorrow, and broken spirits. The damage was catastrophic. A total of 158 people lost their lives, 1,150 were injured, 4,380 homes were completely destroyed, and 7,500 homes were severely damaged. 553 businesses suffered heavy losses, while the power infrastructure was devastated, with 4,000 power poles and 110 miles of electrical lines damaged. Water, electricity, and gas systems were 70% non-functional, leaving thousands without basic services. Rescue operations began immediately, with the National Guard and emergency response teams rushing to the scene. Over $1 billion in federal aid was provided, and more than 10,000 people were placed in shelters. The rebuilding of Joplin took nearly 10 years, and while the city was restored, the memories of that horrific day remain fresh in the minds of those who lived through it. The Joplin tornado will forever be remembered as one of the most devastating tornadoes in modern history. If you found this content valuable, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below.